It's time to make sports talk great again with Curt Schilling and Steve Deace.
And welcome to Blaze Media. I am Steve Deace. He is World Series champion, future Hall of Famer Curt Schilling. Whether you're watching us today on The Blaze, listening to a podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, or watching today on YouTube, here's the drill. Each and every day, we put 25 minutes on the clock. We watch Curt pick his teeth and other things, and we get to as many of the day's sports topics as we possibly can. Who knows what'll happen? Who knows what hygienic heights we will scale here during the program. Today and tomorrow, special episodes. Spring training is getting underway. By this time next week, pitchers and catchers will be reporting all over Florida and Arizona. So each of the next 2 days, we're going to take a look at what to expect on both the senior and junior circuits with spring training getting underway, beginning today with the National League. Curt, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
So we put 25 minutes on the clock and we begin now. Let's play ball. Let's start in the National League East, and we're going to take a look at several questions in each of these divisions. So let's start. Major off-season storylines you see here in the National League East heading into next spring or this spring.
Couple of little ones. The biggest one is yet to happen. I really believe Bryce Harper's going to end up in Philadelphia, and that's going to be one of the overriding and overarching storylines for the National League East this year. Lots of little stories in the division. Derek Jeter's entering, I think, a very crucial year as the guy running the Marlins. I think he's been given a lot of leeway, and I think he should have been. But I think it's time to put up. The Mets with the big trade this winter, turning the roster over. The Nats getting Corbin, losing Harper. Interesting season for them this year. And, the Braves, to me, that's going to be probably which leads to our next question, which is the team to watch in the NL East this year. I don't think there's any close. I think it's Atlanta. I think Atlanta is on the cusp of pretending or potentially being that 1990s franchise again, where they went multiple years in a row. They've stocked their minor league system. They've made some good trades. They are incredibly talented. Probably have, after Betts and Trout, the best player in the game. And I think it's going to be a very big, interesting spring training to see how they develop.
Is it possible that they could take a step back before they take that step forward? And I go back to what we saw with the Houston Astros when they did their rebuild after the Bagwell-Biggio years, and they essentially went into the tank, into hibernation for about a decade, rebuilding their farm system and waiting for these guys to mature together. Then they kind of came out of nowhere. What was that, 2014, 2015? Made the playoffs, and then they were everybody's darling the next off season because they made it a year. They were a year ahead of schedule. They were everybody's darling the next season. Then they took a step back, and now they've been on a postseason run the last few years. Could we see the same thing from the Braves? Because I think a lot of people thought 2019 was the year that a lot of this fruit would ripen. Is it possible they take a step back before they go down the road you're talking about?
It is, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're too talented. I think that they're too deep, and the offseason's not over. I think they made a couple really key, low budget, low risk, high reward signings. And I just think that this is a spring training preview. The thing, if you're a Braves fan and you're going into spring training, you have only one thing to watch for the 6 weeks of spring training, and that is to make sure that the roster you leave Florida with is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So
mark the tape. I'll be making my first plea on behalf of Dallas Keuchel now, because I turned this. I'm sorry that I turned this into the Dallas Keuchel show about a month ago. We did the Hot Stove League, but I brought this up one more time. I think he's a perfect fit for this rotation. Yes. But with the amount of innings he can eat and everything else, I agree. But the fact that he was the ace, the original ace of those Astros, he was going to be their Madison Bumgarner of the franchise. Right. He has that huge year. They have the huge year. And then they all take a step back before they kind of, water reached its level. I just think having been through that with a franchise of a similar makeup, I think he's even more valuable to Atlanta than some other teams because I think he brings a perspective to the clubhouse of being the new hotness and then the pressure of what that means going into the next spring.
Agree and disagree to some extent. I think that there's probably 15 to 20 teams he fits the mold for. But Atlanta, I would agree with you. Atlanta's up there.
Players, prospects to watch in this division during the spring, and why?
Couple. Patrick Corbin in Washington. Going to be very interesting to see. Listen, Scherzer, Strasburg, Corbin could be the best top three in the game. Mm-hmm. It's going to come back. We talked about last year with Strasburg's health. I really believe, like I said, Bryce Harper's going to land in the NL East. I really do believe. I think he's going to end up in Philadelphia. If they lose him, I think it'll be just nobody's fault but their own. And so it'll be interesting to see. I think he signs right before spring training. And I think it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. And then the third one for me is Josh Donaldson. I think that has the potential to be the most division-changing signing, trade, prospect acquisition of the winter if he's if he's healthy.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, if he's healthy, you're talking about an MVP level talent, no question.
Absolutely.
The question of the most pressure this spring is on. Can I give a potential answer, and then you can tell me if I'm wrong and come up with your own? Okay.
Yep.
Because you're the expert here, so I'm going to defer to you on a lot of this. You can't really be wrong,
right? I mean, you can.
Well, that's true because nothing's happened yet. No. Right. So maybe a better way of putting it is that could I be right? Okay. You can't be wrong about something that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Could I possibly be right? See, I think the most pressure this spring is on the Phillies in this division is actually on the Phillies front office. I think if they go to camp next week and Bryce Harper's not in a Philly uniform, a lot of people are going to be very disappointed. He has been earmarked here. I mean, you've been talking about it.
Well, they set it up. They set themselves up.
And you were talking about it when we launched this show last year during the All-Star break and heading into the trade deadline. I mean, there was talk, there's been, sort of rumors hinted at on Twitter several times in the last 2 weeks that this was imminent, and then nothing happened. You and I, we're intimate right now, but I mean imminent, okay? And then it never happened, all right? If indeed, your boy Theo Epstein, we'll talk about his team in a few minutes, or somebody like that swoops in here late, I think that may have a demoralizing impact on the team as a whole because there's a lot of talk. It looked like it was going to be them and the Braves were both going to be a year ahead of schedule. Then they kind of petered out down the stretch.
They really honestly collapsed.
Given the way they finished the year, if they don't land him, I think that sends reverberations culture-wide across the club.
I agree. I do agree. I think that they're getting better. I think they have a chance to compete. I think there's a lot of pressure on them. I actually got a little more specific. I think the pressure is on the Phillies defense this spring, minus 146 defensive runs saved.
Is that bad?
Last year.
Is that bad?
With zero probably being average, I'm going to assume it is. Considering you literally gave up 1 run per game,
just on not being able to field the ball,
just on not being able to make the plays everybody else makes.
No, I don't feel so bad when I had to be the right fielder my first year at the South Des Moines Little League. I don't feel so bad now.
And let me see if I'm the only one surprised by this. 33 and 48. 58 defensive runs saved. First 81 games last year for the Mets. 33 and 48, minus 58 runs saved. Their last 81 games, they were 44 and 37 with plus 27 runs saved. I didn't realize they finished that strong.
And now some of the moves they made you hate to say this, we are talking about the Mets.
No,
but it makes some sense for them to think maybe we were only a 2 or 3 consistent veteran players away, given the way we played down the stretch, and we have a true ace starter. Maybe that's what they were thinking, right?
Yep. And I'm going to just go out and it's before spring training, so I'm not going to be held to these predictions, but I've got the Braves, Nats, Phils, and Mets all finishing within 6 games of each other at the end of the season.
I think the Phillies I think the Astros either win this thing by 10 games or they have a step back like the Astros. That's what I think. You think Atlanta? Did I say the Phillies? I meant the Braves. Yeah, I think the Braves are taking the next step. I believe it's the next step to hit the gas or to pump the brakes. We'll wait and see. Let's move over to the National League Central. There are several offseason storylines here. Yeah. You saw 2 of its teams make the playoffs last year, and the Cardinals were in this into the very final week after a managerial change, and then they had one of the best records in baseball after that. So, what are some of the major offseason storylines in this division this spring?
I got a couple, but two. I'm going to hit right off the one you just finished on. I think Goldschmidt to the Cardinals is huge. You've got an MVP. You've got a city that will probably end up signing him for long term. A dynamic, terrific player added to a team that I think was a lot better at the end of last year than people remember or realize. I like that. I like that. I like that combination. The other thing for me, and I've got a lot of Craig Counsell love, was the Brewers off season, making a couple little deals here and there. Their free agency. I found it odd, their lack of impact in the free agent market, although I can see why. But for me, the Milwaukee Brewers is going to come back to, do they have a true ace? They've got Hader in the bullpen. They've got a bullpen that's just ridiculously awesome. And they mess around. I would expect that you're going to see the Brewers, and this is going to be one of the storylines to pay attention to in spring training for everybody. I think you're going to see the Brewers and a lot of teams go with and I'm going to use air quotes, 3 to 4 man rotation and open up with 1 or 2 guys. But that's going to lead into the next discussion we're going to have in a minute about rules and rule changes that are coming.
Team to watch in this division and why?
The Cubs. Just because you know what? It's amazing to me, and I've done it too. I've been guilty of it, where you just forget about a team because they don't do what they're supposed to do. Rizzo had a horrible year last year. Still one of my favorite players in the game.
There's been turnover in the starting staff, okay? But the 9 guys playing every day are a lot of the same 9 guys playing every day when they won the World Series a couple of years ago.
The team to watch, and the reason you're watching them, you're going to watch what I said earlier. Watch Darvish and Hamels and Health. If they get through spring training with Darvish and Hamels, let's put it this way. If they went out and win 108 and 57, I wouldn't be surprised.
Players, prospects to watch in this division.
The Pirates, James Taillon. Probably, I don't know how much you follow the Mets or if you did follow, but Zach Wheeler coming up to the Mets. I remember people talking about it. They were talking about DeGrom and Syndergaard and all these other guys, and people in the Mets organization were telling me that Zach Wheeler had better stuff than all of them. James Taillon probably when I played, the best arm I ever saw, just raw physical pure arm, was probably AJ Burnett. The things the baseball coming out of his hand was something special. This kid
had some great years when the Florida Marlins were really good.
Yeah. But James Taillon to me is the potential. Listen, I wouldn't be against, and I wouldn't scoff at putting a futures bet on a potential Cy Young award. It'll be a long stretch, but this is a guy I think that if he makes that step this year, he's going to be that first-round draft pick in fantasy baseball next year out of nowhere. So
you're telling us that this is a guy that's going to be a great ace for the Red Sox or the Yankees in about 2024? That's basically what you're telling me?
I think he's going to be a very, very special player if he stays healthy. He's also going to be that guy that brings 6 players at the deadline for the Pirates at some point soon.
Who's the player with the most pressure on him this spring, do you think? Or team or personnel or club?
I got to say probably Addison Russell.
Are you surprised there is not, knowing what you know about how Theo Epstein rolls, are you surprised this thing hasn't been resolved yet about whether he's going to be back? I mean, we know he's facing a suspension. So are you surprised they're just kind of letting this thing ride and haven't just overtly replaced him?
No, I'm not. Because Theo is Theo is one of the few liberals that I know that I actually love. But he's got ethics. He's got honor. He's got character. He also, in sports, there's the knee jerk, right? Fire him or he's the greatest. We're finally starting to realize, I think a lot of people are starting to realize that just, you can't apply that to normal human beings, much less athletes. Whatever comes out of what happened, he made a horrific life-altering mistake. One of the beautiful things about this country is we are a country of second chances. Now, listen, we've talked about this at length multiple times. I don't have any patience or any respect for a man that raises his hand to a woman. I don't know the specifics. I can tell you this, Steve. I've been in situations where I've been around guys or played with guys who were on the dime for this accusation who ended up not actually doing anything. We were talking about that yesterday on the show about the young man who the quarterback from Florida State, the ex-quarterback. You and I don't ever get the full story. And here's the thing. And I think
there doesn't seem to be any denial or defense here, though.
No. You're right. But here's the thing. You and I have, I think, this chemistry here is because we've both been on the exact opposite sides of this.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
You've written about this knowing there's a lot you left off the plate. And I've read about stuff where I know they put a lot more in there that didn't belong.
Sure.
And again, not making excuses. And I think he made it very clear he's not fighting this. It's his fault and all the things that go with that. But I would argue that no one's going to have a bigger telescope or bigger pair of eyes on him. And that trickles down to me to the Cubs. The player to watch would be him. The organization to watch in spring training is going to be the Cubs.
Agreed. While he's suspended, they better get off to a good start.
Yeah.
If they leave him there the entire time, and then they bring him back and they get off to a so-so or terrible start, then all of the stories are going to begin. Yeah. They kept him there because they need to win and they're desperate. All right. If you want to play the Father Flanagan, everybody gets a second chance card. It's better when necessity is not the mother of invention. All right. When the team is struggling and this is an all-star level player, that's when the cynicism, rightfully most of the time, rears its ugly head. So the team better get off to it. They're going to keep him. They better get off to a good start while he is suspended. So it doesn't look like they need him.
Today, I'm telling you, the Cubs, Brewers, and Cardinals are going to finish the season within 3 games of each other.
I could see that as well. Absolutely. Let's go to the American League West, where there's been some years where this sort of conglomeration or traffic jam at the top you've described in the previous 2 divisions has taken place in the past. Some major offseason storylines here in this division that you're looking forward to watching develop over the spring.
I looked through the rosters. I looked at everybody's top prospects. I looked at last year. I looked at what's going on, and I'm looking into spring training. And I got to tell you, honest to God, I believe it's a 2-team division, and I don't think it's even close. I think you're going to see the Dodgers and Rockies be double-digit games above the rest. I don't see any way that the other teams can make up the ground. People aren't, I don't think, realize and expect. Now, if you're right, that has an impact on the other 2 divisions we talked about, which you think are very competitive, because we're essentially going to have to give one of these wild card spots to this division, right? Because they're going to play the D-backs and the Giants at all 18 times, which is going to allow them to build up a bit of a cushion that in these other divisions that are competitive from top to bottom, you may not have the luxury of. Right, but I have these 2. Again, I don't think the other 3 teams. You certainly don't get better by losing A.J. Pollock and Paul Goldschmidt and Patrick Corbin. I feel kind of. I don't feel bad, but I think Torlavella is going to have a real challenging time in this year. San Diego, I have them as non-competitor, but they're being rumored to be in on both Machado and Harper. Whether that's just San Diego driving the price up, I don't know, but that would be a very interesting happening if that did happen. But I'm thinking it's the Dodgers and the Rockies, and
no chance for the Giants. We have seen the danger of underestimating them in the past.
The only reason there is because of Bochy. Bruce Bochy is a manager that can get more out of a set of 25 guys than just about any manager I ever saw. Yes, if they're perfectly healthy. If Baumgartner's that guy and everybody else does at or above expectation, absolutely.
Team to watch in this division and why?
The team to watch in spring training for me is the Dodgers, and it kind of leads into the player to watch the spring training. I'm watching the Dodgers, and I'm really my pitching eyes are going to be on Clayton Kershaw. Walker Buehler's going to be a stud. That what he did, I love everything he did. He's playing in a great park and all the other stuff that goes with that. One of the greatest pitchers that's ever lived is the left-hander in that rotation. And if you talk to people, you can watch fantasy drafts done by professional websites and all these people that play for money, and you can kind of get a feel for what the world thinks of players, and you watch where they slot. Mm-hmm. Clayton Kershaw was a top 5 pick. That's not the case anymore, and I think a lot of people have prematurely jumped off the Kershaw bandwagon. Now,
I think his brand was really hurt by what happened in the World Series last October.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no question.
Yeah.
But the bigger piece to me is, and I worry about it, is he has an injury that is just freaky. This hip thing is such a dangerous place to be hurt as a pitcher.
Your rotation, your motion's off a little bit. You can torque it at any point, right?
Your hip is getting a high impact on every pitch, and it's every bit that whole.
It's like a golfer in his back. I mean, we saw this with Tiger Woods, who's the best conditioned golfer of all time. It took him literally 3 years to come back from a back. Yeah,
I agreed. But part of me, I want to believe he's not on the back half. I want to see him go out and have another Kershaw because he's special. He's a guy that I would pay good money to watch.
Yeah,
pitch
if you're new to our show, if you're just joining us on YouTube, you need to know. Each of us have our inherent biases. One of Curt's biases, if you're a known great player that we are beginning to suspect is on the downside of your career, Curt is always rooting for you to prove us wrong in the media every single time. Regardless of if he played against you, with you, what sport it is, he is always rooting for the veteran great to not be washed up. That's one of your biases. Tell you,
the biggest reason why, Steve, is because for me, it tells me more about that individual than I could ever learn talking to them, right? I want to know what kind of makeup you have. I want to know what's in your heart and will you go quietly into the night? Because I don't think you will.
Players, prospects to watch in the National League West?
Well, the player was for the most part was Kershaw. That's my big one in that division. Because again, I don't believe I think we're going to potentially have three divisions that are not real competitive, and I really honestly don't believe that the West is going to be that competitive. Now, San Francisco, beyond the two teams, I think the Giants or the Dodgers and the Rockies are going to compete all year, and it's going to come. You're going to hear me say this a billion times when people ask for predictions, blah blah blah. I don't make anything prediction-wise hardcore until after spring training because the game changes, and two of the best players in the game aren't signed yet. So, if something happens in one of those, they fluke up and both end up in the NL West, then that changes everything.
Are you surprised, given what they lost in the offseason? One of those would be Machado. Are you surprised the Dodgers didn't go all in for, say, a Bryce Harper, a certifiable star in a city that demands it? Are you surprised?
I don't know that they didn't. I'm surprised they didn't go more aggressively. Maybe they did, but generally you usually find out who the real aggressive teams are. And, maybe here's what I do know. The Phillies are setting this up to be a 12th hour or an 11th hour. Somebody sneaks in and signs them, and you're like, wow, I never saw that coming. It just feels like one or two.
Why wouldn't your boy Theo go to Bryce Harper's people at the end and say, you know what, I'll give you an obscene number for a 2-year deal and you'll be a free agent again.
Yeah, he's already got guys on that team that are going to be requiring obscene numbers that they already know, they trust. The Bryant and the Rizzos, the guy character is a and all the things that go with that. And Bryce is going to bring something bigger than himself, the presence and all the other stuff. And for the most part, I don't see it being his fault. A lot of times it's what the media asks him and he answers. So
who's the most pressure on this spring in the National League West?
Nobody. Honest to God, I don't really believe there's any pressure on the division because, again, I don't think if you're an Arizona fan, you can't. There's no possible way you're going into the season thinking.
I just have a feeling this is. First of all, I don't think the Dodgers are that great. I just think this division sucks.
Yes.
This is setting up as the classic Bruce Bochy Giants play. All right,
you're absolutely right.
I mean, you go 12-6 against the D-backs, 12-6 against 13-5 against the Padres. You go 500 against the Dodgers and the Rockies, and against everybody else. And at the very least, you're in some kind of a wild card race at the end of the year, right?
Yeah. No, but like I said, everything has to fall perfectly for the Giants. I think for the Giants, given Baumgartner and all the pitching issues that they've had over the last couple of years and players that they've lost. Real quick before we finish out, 3 rules to pay attention to.
All right, some extra innings. Go ahead, go.
Yeah, they're looking at paring down mound visits from 6 to 4. they're instituting a pitch clock in spring training. They're also thinking about that becoming a rule. Roster sizes are potentially changing because they're talking about the DH in the National and the American League going from 25 to 26 and from 26 to 28 in September instead of 26 to 40, which I like. The big one for me that absolutely can't happen, but and I think would be one of the worst things ever. They're contemplating a rule that every pitcher has to face a minimum of 3 batters
because of this opener thing.
Well, because of the specialist, because you have the Tony La Russa 3 pitchers, 3 hitters thing, and I think that would be a colossal mistake.
Well, speaking of Tony La Russa, I think that's over-regulating from a rule standpoint.
Sure.
Like a La Russa classic over-management situation. But I don't like that rule. I'm fine with here's the thing. I don't like the first and last rules that you mentioned. Well, the mound vision thing is fine with me too. I don't like the shot clock on the pitchers, and you would know more about this than me, obviously. Nope. But the reason I don't like it is because I think of a shot clock in basketball. Hey, hurry up and get a shot up on the rim. Do we really want to tell a pitcher, hey, hurry up and go into your windup and take and get the ball down to the plate? That's an injury situation waiting to happen, isn't it?
And it's also a self-created problem. It's not really a problem. The guys that push the clock don't stay in the big leagues very long. Because the good pitchers in the big leagues are guys that work quick. They always have been. They always will be. You'll find a guy maybe every now and then pushing the envelope, but it doesn't make a 2-hour game a 4-hour game.
Curt, we'll do this again tomorrow with the American League, man. We'll see you then.
All right.